So, welcome to another episode of BetaTalk. My podcast is supported by what I call the Guild patrons. They also support my newsletter, which you can see on betateach.co.uk, and they are Payaka, Primary Pro, Wolsey, UK Radiators, Cast Rads, and Esby. And you can find out all about them wonderful people on the BetaTeach website. So today on the BetaTalk podcast, I am joined by Graham Hendra. Now, if you don't know who Graham Hendra is, that means you're not really in the heat pump industry, or haven't, or you might be in it, but just for the wrong reasons, trying to make money, not really looking about, seeing who's who in the industry. Graham is very well known. He's been on podcasts. He's well, one of the things he does this really interesting Sunday, I think it's a Sunday, LinkedIn kind of blog, which I find incredibly funny. I mean, he's had me in tears of laughter sometimes because Graham is like me. He says it how it is, but he does inject a quite nice bit of humour into that as well. And they're very, very good reads. So that's on LinkedIn every Sunday. I've got that right. So it is every Sunday, isn't it, Graham?
Yes, it is. Yes. So
Have you got a favourite one of them?
What of blogs? Yeah, probably the one I like asking stupid questions. When people go, "This is this," and you go, "Is that true?" So, well, my favourite one I think was why micro bore and heat pumps work perfectly together.
Yeah, and I imagine. I mean, some of them obviously get lots of because you do it on a LinkedIn. It's not like a normal LinkedIn post. It's the LinkedIn article feature sort of thing,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so I always find you don't get as many comments on articles as you do on posts. This is me personally speaking, but I don't tend to use articles so much. But
Well, I got into it by I started doing them as posts, but articles kind of look better, I think.
yeah,
And I'm with you. I mean, if I knew the algorithm, I'd be a richer man than I am today because I've written things on there and you think this is a brilliant piece
yeah,
and it gets seen 100 times. And then you put some bizarre, I think I put a picture of a badly installed air conditioning unit up and it got seen 100,000 times.
yeah,
And I didn't, that wasn't even mine. It was just a photo.
yeah.
So I don't know. I've even tried putting pictures of our very cute dog on there to see if that works, and still can't get the numbers. So sometimes I'll get tens of thousands, sometimes 1,000. You just no idea.
It's very strange. Now you, as people will know, come from sort of like the we'll talk about your history. So you come from sort of the refrigeration side of things, didn't you? And then you sort of what I suppose a merchant. You imported machines into the UK, didn't you? And
Yeah.
have I got this right, Graham? Was your dad involved in refrigeration?
No, not at all. No, his involvement was well, he was a professor of chemistry, so he knows a bit about thermodynamics.
That's
So
it.
it's kind of in my breakfast cereal. I got fed thermodynamics, so I've always found it weirdly easy to understand, which I don't know why. I just like it. And if I'm honest, I have to give him credit. When I got into this game, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to university. And he had a contact who ran an air conditioning business. And he said, go and speak to him. I wanted to be a car mechanic. And he said, go and speak to him about a job in engineering. And he said, do you want to be a fridge engineer? And I went, what's that? And that was it. So that was really the input I got. I got that first leg up, which is lovely. But after that, really, my dad had nothing really to do with it, except for when I started my heat pump distribution business, he turned up and told me that they were rubbish, um, which I thought was good. But that's his way of discussion starting. Throw in a grenade and then see what happens. Of course, he understands exactly how they work.
Yes, being a professor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But he hasn't got one at his house. That's another boring story about why. But he has got. If you want a house designed not to have heat pumps, he lives in it. It's just impossible. Yeah, no power supply, huge load, no insulation. Yeah, perfect. And it's listed.
Where did he lecture at back in the
Uh,
day?
Southampton Uni.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, he not really nothing. He was a an analytical chemist, but he's really an engineer. So he was doing actually, the closest thing you'll come see what he does. When you go through the airport and they swab you, they put the swab in a machine, and that machine is called a Fourier transform Raman spectrometer, and he invented the technique and made no money out of it. Bless him.
Bless.
But he wouldn't know what to do with the money if he had it. He doesn't. He's a typical academic, no idea about money, not interested in money at all. So,
brilliant. So you started as a fridge engineer, and then you became a distributor. So just sort of tell us about that journey.
So I worked for loads of different people, but basically I worked for distributors for Daikin before Daikin bought them all. So that was where I sort of found my thing. I really liked being in distribution. I'm not a very good installer, but distributors did sort of commissioning, tech support, and so on, and I loved that. And then I sort of wandered around a few jobs like that. And actually, Neil Afram from Space Air back in the day saved me. I had a horrible job where I was promoted beyond my ability at LG. So I was general manager of the UK LG outfit, and I was awful at it. I had no idea because I'm a techie, not a financier. And Neil Afram said to me, "You look really miserable. Why don't you come and work for me?" And I said, "All right." And he said, "Well, you're going to be working in heat pumps." And I went, "What, you mean chillers?" And he went, "Yeah, chillers that heat." So he gave me my leg up. And then I did, for the first time in my whole career, I found a thing where I thought I can actually make some money doing this, because commissioning engineer, service engineer, your job is given away for nothing. So you can't compete. And I thought, this heat pump malarkey, there could be something in this. This is 2009. And out of the blue, a mate of mine rang me and said, Samsung have got this heat pump and they want to give it to someone to sell. Just get on with it. No support, no nothing. Just here's the unit. Good luck. And I went, that is my dream. That we build the support, we build all of everything. And Samsung make the boxes. And so incredible luck, if I'm honest. It would never happen again now. And we became, within the first year, we were the biggest Samsung heat pump distributor in the world, which was, I think we did 72 units. But I still have the trophy behind me of biggest supplier. And we sort of launched Samsung into the UK and got going with it. It was a good unit. Did that for 10 years. And then essentially someone came along and said, would you like to sell it? And I went, yeah, happy days. Thanks for the cash. So I got out of it. I do miss it terribly. I'm still a distributor at heart. That's the bit I'm comfortable in. And then obviously when you sell, you're not allowed to work and you're very limited what you're allowed to do. So I sort of wrote books and taught at college and so on, which was my passion. But now I had the money to do it. And then Haier came along. So I now work for Haier, the Chinese electronics giant. And they said, can you help us build a better heat pump? And I said, well, my whole life I've moaned that the units aren't good enough, all of them. And they said, well, get in here and get on with it then. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, which is very odd because it's nothing like any job I've had before. So
yeah, I was going to mention you've written a few books. I think you're up to number 4 or.
Yeah, I'm right. I've written 4. Basically, they came from a really stupid place. I was paid by someone to write a training course for the finance staff and the receptionists in this heat pump company. They said, these people don't know what we do. Can you tell them? This is what we sell. This is what a heat pump is. So I wrote this really low-level course. And then I went, hang on a second, I could stick this as notes in a book and flog it. And I did it for a bit of a laugh and an ego trip. And thousands of people bought it. It was really odd. And then I wrote a more advanced one, a bit about like the pipe work and so on. And then I wrote a third one and then pummeled them together into the 4th. And I'm currently writing one now, which is going to be riveting, called How to Build the Ultimate Heat Pump.
Oh, right. Okay.
So my idea was, obviously my employer takes some of my ideas, but not all of them. And I think I'm always right, of course. So I've basically gone, you want your heat pump to operate like this, and explained each of the functions, how they work and what the bits inside do. Because it's interesting on LinkedIn, on a lot of these sort of podcasts and so on, if you listen really carefully from where I stand, no one talks about the machine. They talk about the whole system, the pipework, the rads. And there's an assumption that that box in the garden is amazing and really clever. And I can assure you, from someone who lives inside the box in the garden, they ain't that clever.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit, because obviously, I mean, I'm not an expert like you, but my family have been around heat pumps for nearly half a century. And the way I describe a heat pump, just for simplicity for people, is it's something that moves energy from an evaporator. Sorry, from a condenser to an evaporator. And I do that just so that people are aware they're literally everywhere. You know, you walk into a petrol station, they're in the ceiling heating you, because it would be stupid if you got a gas boiler heating a petrol station. The Costa coffee machine's got one. The slush puppy machine on the counter's one. The metal shelving in that garage is all run with removing heat. They're everywhere. So when you say, so let's talk about the air to water stuff that people are very used to talking about now. You and I obviously know air to air very well. What would you say are some of the problems that manufacturers should be working on?
Well, I think that there are a number, but the first one, the really low level one, is what idiot decided to call it a heat pump? Because it doesn't exactly tell you what it does. Right? I would just call it a green boiler, because that's what it is. Yeah, boilers heat stuff, heat the radiators. No one knows how a boiler works, apart from you turn it on and the radiators get hot. And everyone's happy with that. In some weird universe, some idiot decided that we would educate the general public in all things heating. And we would tell them how this machine works and how the radiators work. And my wife doesn't care. She just wants it to be hot. So I think we started with a silly name. Then we started talking about the refrigerants and the components and all the bits and pieces and so on. And then someone came up with this crazy idea of calling it a fridge in reverse, which is brilliant because no one knows how a fridge works. And it's not a fridge in the reverse, it's a fridge. I'll get to that in a second. And so we overcomplicated. And I remember sitting in a office once, listening to one of my colleagues trying to sell a heat pump to this lady on the phone. And I said, "You sounded like a shyster." I said, you're you know, when you're trying to buy something off someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and they fill in with all the bullshit and they give you all the technology and all that lot. I said, that's what you were doing. You were telling them about the global warming potential of the refrigerant and the compressors made by Mitsubishi. And the poor lady's going, will it heat the house? That's, yeah, and to me, it sounds like you're talking horse shit. So that's where I've always gone, right, I want to peel it back a little bit. And my little pet hate is that thing about it, a heat pump is a fridge in reverse. It's not. This is the way I describe it. You've got a fridge at home, right? Everyone's got a fridge at home. You don't know how it works, doesn't matter. But you do know when you open the door, inside it's really, really cold, and you can see some little tubes. And in those tubes is some really, really cold refrigerant. That'll do. It's doing cold. You paid a load of money for the cooling. Now, I'm a heat pump engineer. So what I do is I go around the back of your fridge. And on the back of your fridge is another coil, which is hot. And that's throwing away the heat into your kitchen. As a heat pump engineer, I'm interested in the back of your fridge, the bit that heats. I don't give a toss about the cooling bit. You bought a fridge. I think you bought a heat pump. You bought a machine that heats your kitchen with food power. And so all it is a case of where you stand. A fridge engineer stands by the cold bit and a heat pump engineer stands by the hot bit. It's all the same machine, all the same components. It's doing the same job. It's just which bit are we interested in? And in heat pumps, we want the hot bit. In fridges, you want the cold. And I think that's enough for most people. Some people, of course, will want to know lots more about the fridge theory. They'll have to buy my book. But if you want to just keep it nice and easy, let's keep it low level. And I have this imaginary conversation in my head, which is, I've just flogged you a heat pump for your house, right? You've got it in. You just paid me 15 grand or whatever it is for your heat pump in your house. And you are in the pub with your mates and you're there Saturday night going, I just blew 15 grand on a heat pump. And they're going, are you mad? Like, it's not very cool, is it? If I bought a Porsche or a Ferrari or something, they'd be going, God, I'd like to see that. You go, you just bought a boiler for 15 grand. And I always say to people, give me something to tell my mates in the pub that makes me not sound like I'm mad. And we're terrible at that.
I must admit that fridge in reverse, I've been a massive critic against that for a few years now. I mean, some of the comms people have used it in their comms. I've actually messaged them or emailed them and said, well, "Can you describe what you actually are trying to say when it's a fridge in reverse?" And they can never answer me. So even though they use that terminology, they don't really understand why they're using it. Which means, well, if you don't understand it, why is Joe Blogg's going to understand it? You know. I mean, when you start getting a bit technical with them and say, well, is it something to do with the reversing valve? They haven't got a clue what you talk about anyway. It's a nonsensical description. And I like you could either be interested in the cool bit, which is inside, or the back of the fridge, which is the heat bit. It's a very strange term, but they all seem to use it, Graham. They all seem to.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of the reasons I don't work in marketing, I always say to them, is I can tell you what's wrong with the message. I just can't tell you how to make the message right.
Well, marketing's interesting. I mean, I just did an event a couple of weeks ago at Nesta because I said the skills gap that everyone talks about is actually a symptom of a communications gap. I think the communication out there is woeful. I mean, you and I both know that inverter technology. I don't know, what was that, 1981 Toshiba invented that, and yet you're still getting marketing materials going, it's got inverter-driven technology. I'm thinking, crikey, I was listening to, I was just starting high school when that came out, and you're still banging on about it as if it's something new. It's 4 decades old.
And also you go, okay, what is it? And they go, I don't know. Okay, so you don't know how it works or what it does. I mean, it's just, it is really weird. I mean, we have the same. You get a presentation on a new product, and they go, "It's got this," and then you go, "So what? DC inverter? So what?" Yeah, first saw that in the early 90s. It's kind of it's just so strange, and I suppose it's because there isn't anything else to talk about. The message hasn't moved on to it's a machine that makes you feel comfortable. It's a machine that makes you feel warm. I think people, because we're engineers, we probably all think that's a bit woolly, but actually that's what we're trying to sell, to the general public, is it will keep you warm. And our unit is slightly less ugly than the other ugly units that you can buy. But you've been in all those presentations. I mean, there's a standard format, 10 slides on how many people work for the company and how many factories that you'll never see. Then a load of bizarre claims that you look at it and go, this is absolute rubbish, but unprovable. And then you go, right, do you want to buy it? And you go, well, it looks like a wall-mounted air conditioning unit, just like all the other wall-mounted air conditioning units. You can't really progress on much more. I mean, what are you going to do to your, let's sort of step back a bit. We've got a radiator, it's made out of iron, it's screwed on the wall of your lounge. What are you going to do to that radiator to make that sexier, more pleasant to buy? It's an inanimate lump of steel. That's it. It isn't sexy, but they're always trying to go, oh, it's got this new technology. It's a rad. Heat your lounge. Silent. Okay. Well, they have to have something to talk about, and there isn't. I suppose that's the thing. There isn't any to talk about.
So going back to what other things would you like to see manufacturers change or make the machines better?
The complexity. I mean, let's be honest. Forgetting what's going on inside, you buy a big box, you stick it in the garden. It's got 2 tubes, one in, one out. It takes the water in, it spits it out hot. It's a boiler, right? So let's park that. That's what it's doing. Why is the controller so difficult to use? Why is it so difficult to wire up? Why on earth has it got 1,000 functions? So when you buy a gas boiler, basically the way they work in general is you wire a thermostat to it. When you turn the thermostat up, it starts the boiler. When you turn the thermostat down, it stops the boiler. Nice and easy. It's a simple machine. It's pretty dumb, but it does the job. And in your house, you then have all sorts of crazy controls for underfloor heating and whatever you want to do. For some reason, all those crazy controls are in the heat pump. I don't know why. Some idiot put them in the heat pump. So you then go, oh, I'm going to wire all my valves and my underfloor heating and everything into this bizarre wiring center on my heat pump with a very, very elaborate bit of software driving it that no one understands. And then the machine doesn't do what you think it should do, and you think it's broken. And you go, if it just went on and heated the water and went off and you go, okay, the heat pump's okay. Maybe the problem's with my underfloor heating or my app or whatever. So I think there's too much in them. They're too difficult to wire. They're too difficult to understand. I constantly refer them back to my car. I know that if I came to your house, picked you up, got in my car, could you drive the heating in my car? Of course you could. You get in, you go turn it up, turn the fan up. The car heating system is miles more sophisticated than the heat pump. It's under the covers. There's some incredibly clever software, but the interface is brilliant. And I always say to my developer friends, I work with the people who write the code. I said, have you got a car? Because when I look at what you make, it doesn't look like you own one. Just make it look like hotter, colder, all that business about adjusting the weather compensation and Legionella and all that. Don't care. You do that. I'll just turn it up. Let the machine do all that stuff. And I think nobody's doing that. They may claim they are, but nobody's making a machine that goes, I've got this. I've got the heating. You just turn it up and go and watch TV. I'll adjust everything, make everything perfect. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of why, and I think I know what it is, which is that they don't buy sophisticated enough electronics. The chips are not elaborate enough. In your car, it's got great electronics because it's got it for other jobs. And I think in heating, it's like there's a bargain basement load of chips they've managed to buy, and you go, oh, you can't do any of these funny features. One of my colleagues was saying to me the other day, I was asking, I asked them, what do you want in the machine? And we build it. They said, we want AI in the machine. I said, okay. What do you want AI to do in the machine? You draw pictures. What is this AI going to do for you? And went, it's going to make it better. I went, you can't just go to a developer and go, add AI. And that's what they do. And the poor developer goes, I don't know what you want me to build.
Yeah.
Well, AI knows. So I think we need to be clearer about simple. I like simple things. Mobile phones, I always give the example. They are phenomenally clever bits of kit. But my mobile phone didn't come with an instruction manual. I just turned it on. So why does my wall thermostat come with an instruction manual?
Let's talk a little bit about air-to-air. So I'm hosting a speech that you're one of my you're going to be speaking there. It's at the Heat Pump Show, and if you've not heard about that, I'll put a link in my show notes. It's on April the 22nd, isn't it, Graham?
Yeah. Yes.
April 22nd in Newark. That's the Heat Pump Show. There's still tickets available, I think. So Graham's going to be speaking there. There's going to be quite a lot of speakers there actually, and I'm hosting one of the talks and. Graham's on that talk, and we're going to be chatting about air to air, aren't we, Graham? Because we've got MCS, the bus grant is now considering having air to air. I don't think the details have been quite sort of finalised around how it will work with air to air, has it?
No, it's a bit. I mean, what we kind of know for sure is there will be a grant. It will probably be £2,500, and it's coming soon. But no one's defined soon. I think it's this year it's planned to be in somewhere. And knowing the MCS process, only registered units will get the grant and so on. So they'll copy some bits and pieces, and there'll be a procedure that you have to go through. One of the things that people always moan about MCS is I think they genuinely believe that MCS has got a van full of envelopes with money in, and they just turn up at your house and give you cash. There's a little bit more of a process than that, as you'd expect, because obviously governments are very, very worried about people exploiting or taking advantage of grants. So they want a paper trail. So there will be some sort of paper trail, but we're not. There's a lot of questions about do you have to heat your whole house with air to air, or can you have a mixture of air to air? And example, can you have half boiler, half air to air? Don't know. Can you have half air to water heat pump with underfloor heating and half heat with air to air? No one's really sure. Can you get the grant twice? One for air to air, one for heat pump? Don't know. So these are things that I'm quite excited about going to this panel. I think they wanted me to come along to talk and give my expertise, but I'm actually hoping to learn loads.
Well, we'll both learn, won't we, about how that scheme will run? Because I think they're going to, you're going to have to size an air-to-air system on the whole heat loss of a home. And like you and I know, that can be a little bit like you and I know. So the room you're sitting in now, we were chatting about this earlier. That's probably got a 600 watt heat loss.
Yeah.
So just over half a kilowatt. The smallest sort of internal units, you can't get them.
So,
Yeah, about two. So I mean, if you think about that in the air to water world, you wouldn't go and stick a 2 kilowatt, loads of radiators in one room that push out 2 kilowatts when it only needs 600 watts. You have to size everything right. But so this sizing thing is going to be quite interesting, and how people are doing it. I mean, I would argue you don't need it in every room for a start. I mean, I can heat a home up quite happily with just one unit downstairs. The farmer's happy. He can have one on his landing. He's happy because it's going into the bedrooms. Job done. And as you and I know, air to air stuff is extremely cheap. I don't think people realise how cheap it is, do they?
well, I mean, if you want to know the price, I obviously couldn't divulge the pricing, but if you go on holiday to Spain and go to a supermarket, you can see how much they are in the supermarket. And trust me, the supermarket's doing okay selling them at that price.
Very cheap technology. And of course, it does decarbonise your heat. I mean, you can, if for most of winter, you can not have your oil boiler on, your gas boiler, whatever you've got, and just have this little mini split unit, running along while you're watching your EastEnders or whatever you want to watch in your living room, and it's decarbonising heat. But we do seem to be, we do sort of have this fixation on a home has to be heated by a single source, and it has to be able to heat that home at all temperatures outside. And I think that's going to cause issues, because that's not how we've always done it. We've had different sort of systems in homes. Sometimes it is nice, obviously, if your central heating system can do the whole home. But I think when we start to introduce air to air, we might have to think of it in different ways, because the primary goal is decarbonising heat. But if we've got all these sort of rules and regulations and paperwork, it's going to get quite complex. And like you said earlier, the customers just want to be comfortable and as cheap as possible. They're not going to bother with it all if it's all going to be sort of so complex and involve all this paperwork.
But one of the things that I think is a fundamental flaw in the whole issue is that the regs and the whole guidance is written by well-meaning middle-class people who can afford it. And one of the things that I've put a heat pump in my son's house, and my son's only young, and it's his first house, and he's got a big mortgage and so on. And he said the only thing that interested him was, can you run it so it never costs more than £5 a day? And I said, well, yeah, you can set it up to do that. You have to only heat half the rooms for a couple of hours a day. And he said, because I don't care so much about the comfort. I care that I've only got a £5 a day. And I, as a sort of middle class person, we went, well, nothing you want about. I just heat the house to 21 degrees in every room. It's what we do. And I think people aren't very good at seeing how other people live. So one of the things that is great about air to air, actually, my very first house had no heating at all. 3-bedroom semi. Yeah, I think it cost me 40 grand. It shows how old I am. And I had a load of mast air conditioning units, which I'd ripped out of an office. And we heated the house with 2 of them. And because they were free, basically. So I stuck them on the wall. It looked awful and they were noisy and they were horrible, but they were heat. And what we did is we would come in from work at 6 o'clock in the evening. The house is at 10 degrees. You press go, and within 15 minutes, that lounge is at 20, 21 degrees. Yeah. It's lovely and warm. We're watching TV. As soon as you turn it off, it's freezing. It is properly cold because it hasn't had time to heat the walls up. But we just supplied that heat when we needed it, turn it off. And that worked for us. And I think that is where air-to-air is so amazing, is that you can, especially if you're struggling a little bit to pay the bills, you can heat that one room. You can heat it very quickly. You can only heat it when you need. And if you think my office, I used to have an office not at home. I used to have an office, somewhere else, and the heating was off all weekend and so on. You go in on a Monday and everything's freezing, and you turn the aircon on, air-to-air heat pump. I call it aircon because that's what it is. Turn it on. Place is lovely and warm. As soon as I leave in the evening, turn it off again. So you use it in a totally different way to wet central heating, which you tend to leave on. And I suppose we've got to educate people, or educate them is maybe not the right word, but you have this technology at your fingertips now. When you get in your car is freezing cold. You turn the heating on, and it heats your car within a few minutes. That's an air-to-air heat pump. That's what it is. When you go to your hotel room, you walk in, you put the card in the slot, the aircon comes on, it heats the room really quickly. So it's a quick system. It's efficient. It decarbonizes. It can be a lot lower cost than putting radiators, pipework, and so on in. Um, so I think it's a great technology. It should have been taken on years ago, but I also kind of know why it hasn't. So if you go, I spent some time in China and Korea and so on. In China and Korea, they don't have wet systems. They have systems like air conditioning, because when they built it, they didn't put the wet system in. And they have a wider variation in temperature. So maybe -2 in the winter, but +30 in the summer. So you want a bit of cooling and a bit of heating. So your heating engineer is also an air conditioning engineer in the summer. Same in Spain, Italy, Greece, and so on. In the UK, it's never hot. So you aren't an air conditioning engineer, you're a heating engineer. And aircon engineers are, they work in commercial buildings, because there's so few people have air conditioning at home because it's not hot enough. It's getting there now. I look out my window. A couple of the houses near me have got a little split unit which they've got in their bedroom. So I think as we get warmer, we'll get more of that, and then the heating engineers will become air conditioning engineers through necessity. But up until now, or the last few years, you're doing a perfectly good living heating stuff. So I think my colleagues in Southern Europe all look at us like we're mad. The idea that we go, you've got to be an F-gas engineer, and you're an aircon engineer or a heating engineer. They go, no, everything to do with temperature. We do it all. So there's a great opportunity for the plumbers out there. They've come in, they've put in this lovely wet heating system. And the room, I would always say, the first one's your conservatory. You stick it. You think about a conservatory. This time of year, we're in March. This time of year, that conservatory is going to be cold. So you want to go in there, press the button, bosh, on comes the heat. You're sitting in the conservatory having Sunday lunch. In the summer, it's boiling, so you want to cool. Only air conditioning, air-to-air heat pumps can do both. And you want to heat it for very short periods of time, not every day. And I think once we start getting them into conservatories, people will say, do you know what? I want a bit of that in my bedroom, when it's really, really hot. We have that in our house, when the sun's been beating on the house all day, it's boiling. But also times like today, when it's a little bit, you get a very sharp drop in temperature at night. And you think, just want a little bit of top-up heat before I go to bed when I'm getting dressed for bed. 15 minutes of heat, that's air to air every day. You can't get your boiler or your heat pump to heat that one room quickly. So it is an amazing technology. I love it. But we consider it a bolt on here in the UK. In new build, if it went in on day one, I think you'd never get around to putting radiators in again.
It's interesting why some developers, new build developers, haven't really caught on to that idea, because that's a selling point for people now, to have your home guaranteed to be cool and not overbearingly hot in the summer, like a lot of them have been in the last few summers.
The other thing is that the solar panels on the roof, if you think about it, when you most need the cooling, the solar panels are working hardest. So when people go, oh, you burn loads of electricity, you go, yeah, the electricity I'm making. So it's quite interesting.
What about installation of air to air? So I suppose I've been a big proponent of getting air to air recognised more in the UK domestically, and now with the announcement of the bus grant considering air to air, I do have a concern, because I do know lots of engineers now rushing off to do their F-gas. You used to teach F-gas and you've taught in colleges, and I think you'll probably agree. There will be some engineers go out, get their F-gas. They've got what they call is a ticket, and then they'll go and put this stuff in rubbish. So my biggest concern is they won't vac down the system properly, and I'll probably have to explain that to the listeners in a minute what that is. But have you got the sort of same concerns?
Um, Sort of. So let's just break the installation into a couple of bits. So you've got your little outdoor unit, plonking that on the floor. That is if you will, that's a DIY job. That's bolting something to the floor. So pretty much anyone can do that. You've got your little wall-mounted unit indoors. 4 screws on the wall, hang it on the plate. Again, very, very easy for anybody, any tradesperson to do. You've got to drill some holes in the wall. Again, not a massive problem. So far we haven't got any new skills that a plumber wouldn't have. Um, the difference is we use tiny pipework. So in refrigeration, it is all microbore. Everything is it's smaller than microbore because we can get so much more heat down a pipe. So the biggest pipe you'd need in your house is no thicker than your wedding ring finger. That's for the whole house. So the pipes are actually flexible. They're like cable. It's ridiculous. The actual physical connection to the machines each end, you need a special tool for. You need a flaring kit or a brazing kit. You have to connect it up correctly, and the pressures are much higher, so we have to use slightly better quality fittings. And then, of course, it's like you mentioned, those pipes are full of air. And refrigeration and air absolutely do not go together. So we have to pull the air out of those pipes before we let the refrigerant into them. And this is called vacuum. You use a special pump, it sucks all the air out. And actually, we're not worried so much about the air, we're worried about the moisture in the air. That's the killer. If you don't get that out, it's like filling your car engine with dirty water and then wondering why you need a new car engine. That's the closest analogy I can think of. So the better you get that air and that moisture out the pipes, the longer your system's going to last. There is a procedure. It makes me laugh. You use a machine, and it's supposed to tell you when it's finished. And there's all sorts of interesting theories about that, which we'll bore you about another day. But lots of people say, I just vac it for 20 minutes. That's not correct. There are better ways of doing it. Bizarrely, though, when you go to Southern Europe, they don't do that at all. They blow the air out with refrigerant. It's completely illegal to do that in the UK, but no one cares. And it takes about 15 seconds to do it, so-called air purge. I used to do it when I was a kid. Now you're not allowed to do it. So a vacuum might take 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, depending on how cold it is and how much moisture is around. And an air purge takes 25 seconds. So I think we're going to see people air purging. It's something, it will make me very, very unpopular with the F-gas community, but there are no Freon police. So if you go around breaking the F-gas rules, you go to prison. Apart from the fact that there are no police to catch you, there's no one to see you do it. So it's kind of a bit self-enforced, but also the people selling. So if you went to buy a bottle of refrigerant, you have to produce your ticket to show that you're qualified. Unless you go to Halfords, in which case you can just buy it anyhow. Anyone can buy it in Halfords. Work that one out. Here's a weird analogy for you. I am F-gas, so I have been for 30 years. Technically speaking, it's illegal for me to buy the refrigerant in Halfords, but it's okay for you. Because I signed a thing saying I won't do that. Weird, but there we go. So I think I don't want to see guys running around in vans with Freon police written on them, but we do need to accept that because it's not policed, especially not domestically, there's going to be abuses of the F-gas regulation like there are in every other country in the world. In your office or your hotel where you're having a commercial system done, you'd be crazy not to use an F-gas installer because they're the sort of people that will get caught and get reported and so on. But the idea of getting caught, outside my shed sticking a heat pump, air-to-air heat pump in, slim, to say the least.
Well, I mean, that comes to that permitted development thing as well. I mean, people don't bother with that, do they? They put units up wherever, don't they, for aircon?
Yeah, I mean, I look out of my bedroom window and my neighbour's got an aircon unit which is 2.5 meters up the wall blowing towards our house. I mean, you can never hear it, it's silent, but it looks blooming ugly. Now, that guy did not get permitted development, no chance.
I wonder what the manufacturers will think about the sort of the VAC process. So in the industry I've grown up in most, the sort of the boiler industry, Boiler companies don't mind if your boiler breaks down in 10 years because that's a new sale. Now, you and I know if you don't vac a line properly, that moisture, I mean, because it was all roughly to do with when they changed refrigerants. So you and I are the same age, Graham. So when we left school is when the Montreal Protocol came around, 1987, was it? So when we changed, we start to remove chlorine from the refrigerants. So these new refrigerants we were using didn't like particularly the oils, because I don't think people realise there's oil in the system as well, not just your refrigerant. And then we start to use these synthetic oils, which are POE, aren't they? Polyester or something. And they soak up moisture. So in there is obviously moisture. So when you pull a vacuum on that pump, what you're doing is you're actually lowering the pressure so much inside them copper lines that your boiling point is something like -12. So it's boiling off the moisture, and then the vac pump sucks it out. And then, like you say, some people think it's to do with time. Well, that's not really the thing, is it? You want to look at your rise test. How quickly did it rise up? Sometimes that means there was just extra moisture needed boiling off. If it's rising rapidly and keeps going, you've got a leak. And you can tell things from that. But there's this thing called the triple vac test, which is like what good engineers will. I mean, we pulled out a unit the other day. We put it in for Pink Floyd in 1986, and the unit was still working. Now, what happens if you have any tiny bit of moisture in? That reacts with that synthetic oil, and over time, it will ruin the machine. It basically destroys all the windings, doesn't it? Now, but that won't happen for a few years, and it will happen just after the warranty runs out of the machine. So there's part of me thinks, well, manufacturers aren't going to be bothered how these things get put in, because it's, someone will turn up to that 5 years later, the homeowner say, yeah, it's not working. The engineer say, yeah, you need a new one. It's gone. And of course, that's another sale. So I do obviously the purging thing is how it used to get done. Everyone used to do it, and it's going on. There's a million heat pump systems being put in as we probably speak around the world. They're everywhere. And purging is the main, when people turn them out, they purge it and then the job's done. But obviously we'd like to do it a bit better in the UK. But so it'd be interesting to, because like you said, there's no police. I mean, MCS use what they call certified CBs, certified bodies. People like the APHC, NAPIT, Tech. But I mean, they aren't going to know. They're not going to know whether it's been vac down properly. No one will know.
You can't. The bizarre thing is you can't tell.
No.
I've got an air conditioning unit in my garage because I'm old, so I like the heating on when I'm working in the garage. And you could go to that and look at it and go, it's been quite nicely installed, but you can't tell me how well it was that vacuuming process was done. In the bad old days, you used to use a thing called a total tester. And you used to stick it in, and it would leak the refrigerant through some chemicals. It was like a pen. You stuck it on the system, and the refrigerant would leak through the chemicals, and you could tell how much moisture was in them. They are totally illegal now because they leaked refrigerant. That's what they did. But you can't tell. So, like you say, it might have a little bit of moisture. And so what happens is the moisture, when the compressor runs hot, so it's like a nice little pressure cooker, it's running hot. You're spraying essentially water vapor at it. It reacts with the oil. The oil, I always say the oil we use today is very much like brake fluid instead of engine oil. So it sucks moisture in. That hits the hot compressor. The compressor windings are covered in varnish. The varnish is susceptible to acid. So we slowly eat the varnish away, and then it ruins the compressor, and then it ruins the whole system. So that acid goes everywhere in the system. You have to replace everything. It's called a burnout. It smells horrible. I've actually got a compressor behind me cut open, which was burnt out. And it's 20 years later, it still smells horrible. So it destroys the machine. So but I am with you. I mean, it's a weird one. From a manufacturer's point of view, the ideal machine is the machine that breaks down the day after the warranty and you buy a new one. Obviously, no manufacturer is going to say that, but that's true of everything, cars, televisions, and so on. And the other thing now is that the cost of the labor is so high compared to the cost of the bits. Example, if you buy a spare part compressor for a 2 kilowatts heat pump, the compressor is more money than the whole new machine.
Yeah.
So, and the guy putting that in is going to spend, or lady, is going to spend half a day doing it. They get the machine in and out in 2 hours. So it's faster to replace the whole machine. Yeah. Now, I don't like that. That's but it's life. It's like your domestic fridge. When I was a kid, they taught you how to fix domestic fridges. Now you don't fix them; you buy a new one. So it's the way it is.
Wash machines, that's another one. Sealed units.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you can fight it. You can pay someone to fix the thing, but people aren't going to. So I think the VAC is going to be interesting. I think it's very, very difficult for us to prove without doing analysis. So what you do if you have a burnout, you take a sample of the oil, you basically cut the system open, pour the oil out, send it for analysis, which costs 5 times as much as a new machine. So we as a manufacturer aren't going to do that. Yeah, unless you bought 100 and 100 have all gone wrong in the same week, then maybe they would start looking at that issue. So I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen. I know that some people get very, very heated about, we must stamp out these people doing this sort of behavior. And you go, you're trying to stamp out eBay and Amazon. You're never going to win. These guys are pretty big.
That's a
and
good
if you
point.
you knock that eBay shop on the head, it'll open up tomorrow again. So I think the way to look at it is, what sort of installation would you want? I know that if I wanted a system in my bedroom at home, my wife would want it to be a very quiet machine, beautifully installed, no mess. She wants the pipework hidden, want the unit tucked out the way. And yes, that's going to cost us 500 quid more to have done. If you want a unit bashed in, cheap, it's only going to run for a few weeks a year, you haven't got the money, you have to stick the unit in quickly, then you'll go for the cheaper installation. And I'll leave you with an interesting idea. So we have a really peculiar thing in the UK, which is that all fixed appliances, i.e. things that are screwed to the wall, have to have a permanent power supply. Right? So you put your air conditioning unit on the wall, you screw it to the wall, and the cable comes down the wall, and you cannot put a 13 amp plug on the end. It has to have a properly wired spur. Okay? So you have to get an electrician to wire the spur up. In Holland, it has a plug on it. So the electrical installation cost is 0. You go plug it in the mains, fine. So we've got that one extra step, that extra 200 quid for a Sparky to come and basically wire the cable in. And I think that is something that people will go, I'm not paying that. Why can't I plug it in? In Greece, it's even worse. I mean, so we have installers in Greece. These guys are doing 8 units a day. The teams running around doing 8 units a day. They actually do a thing in Greece. The cable's 1.5 meters long. And if it's not long enough to get to your plug, they'll sell you an extension lead. And you kind of go, you've got to look at what you want to do. If you want to spend 500 euros on an installation, sorry, I work in euros all the time, so I work in euros. So 500 euros on an installation, it may not be that pretty. It might not have the beautiful trunking and the pipework hidden. If you want to spend 1,500 euros, it's going to be amazing. And I think those guys who moan about the F-gas and so on, they're the 1,500 quid camp. They're not competing in the 500 quid installation space. Those customers are never going to pay 1,500 quid. Forget about them. They're not in your bit. It's like the difference between Rolls-Royce and Kia. They don't compete. They make the same product. They don't compete. You're in one camp or the other. That'll make me incredibly unpopular, but it's unfortunately the truth hurts.
That's a very interesting point about the electric. I hadn't thought. I mean, going back to the proving a proper VAC process. I mean, you could do video evidence. I mean, so you could show a video of the microns being pulled, the rise test. You're using oxygen-free nitrogen because you're going to do that twice, and you could sort of prove that on the video. Going back to your electric thing. So I bought my first telly the other day, Graham. I've never bought a telly in my life. I've got a 65-inch one, which my daughter was really impressed with. But it's bolted to the wall because I had to buy this massive bracket for it. But obviously that comes with a plug. But you're right.
It's not a fixed appliance. No, I don't know why.
And we do complicate sometimes things because you and I know if you just put it in a simple little mini split, what is wrong with just plugging it in? Nothing really. Gone are the days where they're these great big beasts using these massive sort of capacitors that we used to all use years ago. But
Yeah, I mean, it draws less power. If you go and buy an oil-fired radiator, or oil-filled radiator from Arc, it draws 3 kilowatts, same as a kettle. Your mini split will draw 700 watts. That's a much less. Why do I need a proper power supply? Because it's safe. Okay, so I don't understand the electrical regs. I'm not a Sparky, but your television is bolted to the wall, but it's not a fixed appliance. Your hot water cylinder is a fixed appliance, so the immersion heater has a spur, not a plug. And you go, well, hang on a second. Well, they all look pretty fixed. Your things like your microwave is obviously sitting on the top. It's plugged in. But if it was fitted into a concealed unit, you still plug it in, and you go, but that's a fixed appliance, isn't it? I don't understand the change. My washing machine, I don't move my washing machine much. It stays where it lives, but that has a plug on it because it's not a fixed appliance. I don't know what the definition is, but if I am a manufacturer of heat pumps, I suppose, I'd be lobbying for air conditioning units can be plugged in, because what they are, the electronics inside are so ridiculously safe. I've never tried this, and I do not want you to try it at home, but they say that if you take the cables off the compressor and hold them in your hand and start the machine, you can't feel the shock. It's so quick. It goes that you're not a compressor. I've measured it with meters and oscilloscopes, and I can tell you can't see the electricity at all. It's that fast, but I'm still not prepared to hang on to the cables and turn it on. So they are really, really safe machines. So I don't know. I mean, there's all these little things, and you think, so Mrs. Miggins has been out. She's bought a machine on Amazon. She's paid 400 quid for it. Comes with the brackets, the feet, the unit, indoor, outdoor, in pre-charged pipes. We're not allowed to use them in the UK. You are everywhere else. So you just plug them in. It's done. There's no vac. So you see them when you go on holiday. You see the pipes all coiled up outside. It looks ugly because you can't change the size of the pipes there for a certain length. Plug it in the mains. They've just bought themselves a unit and got that thing in for under 1,000 quid. And I'm trying to compete with them with a machine which needs a professional installation, a Sparky, a vac, and so on. I want $2,000. Which is better? Well, neither. I mean, they both work.
They do. I mean, abroad, some of the stuff you do see abroad is quite dangerous. I mean, I'm going back to the days of unvented systems. But going back to air to water, what are the things you'd like to see changed? Because obviously that's the most common heat pump system people think about, or people actually putting into domestic situations. What do you think should be changed in that sort of sector?
I think that the number one thing that should change in that sector is that we, the installers, should start listening to our customers, because it's quite a bizarre transaction. You ring me up and say, I'd like a heat pump. What I hear is you'd like me to come round, rip all of your radiators out, all your pipework out, your cylinder, your boiler, and everything else. You go, no. I just want a heat pump. I don't want you to mess around in the house at all. I just want a heat pump. And we go in and go, no, everything out, every bit of pipe. And you go, forget it. You just lost the order. You didn't listen to the customer. So I think we should be speaking to the customer going, we can literally chop your boiler off and put a heat pump on the end. If you want, we can do that. We can keep your cylinder, you can keep everything you want. But if you do that, your run cost will be, I don't know, 2,000 quid a year. If we change this radiator, this piece of pipe, this cylinder, etc., it would be £1,000 a year, but it's going to cost you £5,000 extra. Which would you like to do? That would be what I would like us to change a bit. You hear people going, I'm not doing the job if I don't replace everything. And you go, that's not what the customer asked for. So I think we should listen much more to what they want. We should inform them of the pluses and minuses. I was speaking earlier about my dad's house. My dad said he's thinking about putting a heat pump in. The radiators were put in before I was born in 1970. I said, Dad, those have got to go, mate. I said, the pipework's got to go. It's finished. That heating system is done. And he said, I don't want to change all that. I said, no one will even change your boiler. Right? No one's going to touch that system because it's so old. And he's going, well, I don't want to do that. I went, okay, you're stuck. You've got yourself in a corner now. So I think about that a little bit. I think there has to be a reduction in price. Yeah, I know how much heat pumps actually cost to make. I'm not going to tell you, but it's slightly less than you pay. I think if we bring the price of the kit down, the simplification, why are we putting so many bits on the circuit? You know, no one's doing what we used to call at Daikin a cost down. What bits don't you need? Yeah, every piece you don't need is a saving in hardware and a saving in labor. So let's make it really, really simple. And then we'll get a lot more adoption. The beauty with boilers, I hate a gas boiler more than anyone else in the world. But the beauty of a gas boiler is it's a box that fits in the cupboard in the kitchen. You hang it on a bracket and you stick a power supply and 2 tubes to the damn thing and it works. And no one's going, oh, you need all these extra bits and glycol and all this other crap. It's nice and simple. And we've got a little bit carried away with additions because, this will be controversial, there is no price pressure in heat pumps because an idiot gives you $7.5 grand for putting it in.
Well, the subsidy does cause. So a lot of the engineers I speak to, some people hate that subsidy. They hate it, and then others really like it because it's obviously given some people a bit of a leg up. They've been interested in heat pumps, and it's the means to have enabled them to get a heat pump. Then you've got a whole camp saying, well, yeah, but the people getting them are middle class and upper, and know that there is an argument to that. And where sometimes the people that probably do need better, comfortable heating can't access it. So it's we're in an interesting industry, aren't we? I mean, we haven't solved all the problems yet by any means, and I'm sure there's going to be a few more problems along the way as well.
I think you will see simpler, lower cost, etc. It has to. It has to be. I always say we're still in the kit car phase. We're still building kit cars. Someone's going to build a complete system at some point and plonk it on the floor. But yeah, it is pretty weird. And you're dead right. Are the wrong people or the right people, depending on where you stand, getting them? It is generally people who've got money who can afford the extra bit who take them on. I've now taken the view that the bus is not a grant at all. It is a tax rebate for higher rate taxpayers. Or it is a benefit for middle class people. Either one you can take, but that's what it is. It's almost kind of you moan about your income tax. You go, guys, do you want $7.5 grand of that back? Yeah, buy a heat pump then. MCS probably don't sell it that way, but that's what it is.
Going back to your customer thing, so you obviously we've got the Heat Geek Disrupt, and there's the EDF version. So that's very similar to that process. So they will. They'll explain that they can put you a very simple system in, but it might cost you a lot more to run. So I suppose that's being thought of now, isn't it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it has changed a lot. I mean, in the last, I'd say after COVID, that's the big change. So pre-COVID, it was you're having this system or I'm not doing it, and it's going to cost you a fortune. And we've moved a little bit more. New people coming in. Luckily, all us old geezers who came from that weird place, we're becoming less and less important now. There were people, bless them, who made a living out of doing very, very high value ground source installations, in stately homes. They don't do that anymore. We're moving away from the high end into the middle, and you have to adapt. And if you don't adapt, then you end up going bust. So I think we'll move, and as we move into the lower cost, we're going to have to start thinking about how can we prune pricing out, how can we make it more like a boiler, simpler, quicker. I think I don't like the grant, not because the grant is bad or whatever. The thing I don't like about the grant is it kills one sector of the market, which is if you call me now saying my boiler is just broken, I need a heat pump. It is technically possible for us to get an engineer to your house tomorrow to start installing your heat pump, but the paperwork makes that much more challenging. So if you haven't got a couple of weeks, it makes it more difficult. And that's what the grant has to do. You have no other way because they're giving away free government money. So, if your boiler goes wrong, the guy will turn up tomorrow with a boiler in the van, get it on the wall, and you're winning. And I think we probably, as an industry, lose a huge amount of potential custom because my wife rings up and says, "Can I buy a heat pump?" I go, "Yeah, but it's going to be a couple of weeks till it's running." She goes, "Oh, sod that. Let's get the combi boiler in, have a shower tomorrow."
And that's exactly what's happening out there.
Mm.
There's very, very, I know a few people on LinkedIn have been talking about getting a heat pump for 7 years. They still haven't got one, and when their boiler breaks down, they want a new boiler straight away because they can't wait them 2, 3, 4 weeks for that paperwork trail. It's a big
Yeah.
problem. Big problem.
But I think EDF and HeatGeek have massively reduced that, sort of 3 weeks down to whatever they're doing, much less. But it's still a difficult sell to kind of go expensive. You're not going to have a shower for a few days. It's still all for that 7.5 grand. If they would just get rid of the 7.5 grand, my prediction would be if you got rid of the grant tomorrow, the price of heat pump installations would drop by about 7.5 grand.
Talk about HeatGeek. They've just sold. I think I don't know if sold's the right terminology with all this acquisition and merger stuff, but to a company you'd know well, Graham Carrier.
I heard, and I sent them a message going, "Being bought out is the best day of your life."
I've got I'm actually got a phone call with a deal from HeatGeek tomorrow, I think, because I'm going to try and get the lads on the podcast from HeatGeek, because one of the questions being asked at the moment, so most HeatGeek install Valent. Well, now you sort of kind of Carrier, so Carrier also acquired Wiesmann. So one of the questions I'm getting asked all the time is, are they going to now swap over to using Wiesmann heat pumps?
They have an amazing model. I've had a look at it. I went to see them, and one of the things I really like about what HeatGeek do is they put the details of your house into their model, and it looks at maybe 20 different heat pumps of which is going to be cheaper to run, which is cheaper to install, because of the way they're put together. And it's possible that they're choosing Valent because the return on investment is the best with that machine because maybe it's easy to install or low cost or whatever. And I really like that. So they're not necessarily just choosing the most efficient or the cheapest, it's what is the best thing for your machine. It pains me that Valent are so popular. They're now the UK's number one. It pains me because I always think they're the great underachievers of heat pumps. They should be better than they are. And their machine is okay. I'd love it to be. I would. I work for a rival of Valent, and I'd love to be able to sit here and go, God, I wish our unit was as good as that. And I don't. Look at it and go, it's the Vauxhall Cavalier of heat pumps.
I used to have a Vauxhall Cavalier estate. What was your first? Mine was a Mark II Escort. Because we're the same age. What was your first car? Because you like your cars. I know you like your cars, mate.
Austin Allegro estate in antique gold with poo brown interior. Get the ladies away.
That'd probably be worth money now, wouldn't it, Graham?
I don't know. Not much.
Well, and what bikes do you like? You got your bikes, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got 9. So I'm a BMW man, I guess. I've got 3 BMWs.
You got an RR? Is it an RR?
No. I did have a Fireblade, but I'm a bit too old for that. So I've got like a touring bike. I've got a GS because at my age you have to have a GS. And I've got a few like silly bikes because I do. I'm doing a rally to Scotland in a few weeks' time, and you have to go on a bike which is over 30 years old and under 2 grand. So I've got like some horrible old BMW which I bought for that, and I do a couple of like events where they're like Glastonbury Festival on motorbikes. So I've got a couple of like silly dirt bikes for that. So yeah, they're very addictive motorbikes.
Well, my cousin, he's obviously in the same game as you. He's 76. He's still riding about on his Augusta Brutale MV.
Very nice.
He's got a couple of Ducatis. I think he's got a VRF Honda as well. Well, and actually, he's got an old. You talk about old. He's got an aerial up in his loft, which is really old.
Well, I'm currently rebuilding a 1930s Rudge, which is fighting me in the garage. And I've got a couple of old bikes. My dad always went on about a bike called a Vincent.
Yeah.
So in COVID, we bought one of them as a wreck and rebuilt it. And my dad loves it. I hate it. It's a great ornament. It's not a great motorbike, but there we go. So yeah, I've got all sorts. But that's my passion. You know, I spend my weekends rebuilding old wrecks, and I'm not very good at selling them. That's the problem.
Well, carry on selling heat pumps.
Yeah.
Graham, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, buddy. And obviously
Thank you.
we're gonna see each other soon for a meal the night before the 22nd of April. So any of the listeners want to come along to that, that's in Newark. Newark Showground, isn't it, Graham? I think
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So Graham, thanks ever so much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me. See you soon.